This is part 3 of our background and reading out loud tourist excerpts from or to Egypt. I am finishing up with an account from the 1860s. The steamer left November 29th at the appointed time, with about 40 first and as many second-class passengers. We found her very comfortable, with a large saloon on deck, more capacious than any of the Cunard steamers, there being no outside passage around it, the saloon and promenade deck taking up the whole width of the ship. Below there were staterooms for 151st and second-class passengers. She was about 3,000 tons and 400 horsepower, and had, like others of the line, a greater speed than the English. The style of cooking and service on board was French. The Peninsular and Oriental line, however, has fine first-class steamers, and probably equally good in many respects. They stop at Malta, the French at Messina, the Italian line between Brindisi on the Atlantic and Alexandria, saving nearly half the sea travel is well spoken of. In fact, all these lines have some advantages and disadvantages, but neither is to be condemned as unworthy of patronage. After a somewhat rough passage of 5.5 days, during which we touched for an hour at Messina, we arrived at Alexandria. Here we were boarded by numerous dragomans, guides, porters, boatmen, and others, rendering the deck a perfect babel of tongues, among which that of the noisy Arabic prevailed. Now I am moving to an account from 1873. This is from one of the Murray Guide books, and I got it from the Library of Congress. From October to April, and this is season for visiting Egypt. From October to April is the best season for a residence in Egypt. For those who intend to do the whole Nile voyage and who can choose their own time, the months especially to be recommended, both for climate and convenience of traveling, are November, December, January, February, and March. During these months, winds from the north are more or less prevalent. They not only cool the air, but are absolutely necessary for making progress up the Nile. A good deal will, of course, depend on the destination of the traveler after leaving Egypt. Of course, these remarks are not intended to apply to those who merely propose to do the country in the shortest possible time that steam and their own energy can enable them to accomplish it in. They may go from London to the Second Cataract and back in 6 weeks, and any time during the months above or during the months named above will be as good as another. But even to them it may be said, choose, if you can, some period between the middle of December and the middle of February. It is perhaps, everything considered, the most delightful season in Egypt. The temperature is delicious, often indeed cool, the Nile neither too high so as to cover land, nor too low so as to look like a huge canal flowing between high banks, over which it is impossible to see from the deck of either boat or steamer, and the country perfectly lovely in coloring. It is in fact springtime. Further information useful for invalids as to the season for visiting Egypt will be found under Preliminary Information D. There are various routes by which the traveler may reach Egypt from England, but he will probably choose one of the 4 following. 1. Direct from Southampton to Alexandria by P&O steamer via Gibraltar and Malta. 2. Across the continent to Brindisi, and thence by P&O or Italian steamer to Alexandria. 3. Across France to Marseille, and thence by Meretseger steamer to Alexandria. 4. Across the continent to Trieste, and thence by Austrian Lloyd steamer to Alexandria. This next account is from 1878, also gotten from Library of Congress. Leaving Southampton under the cold and cloudy skies of a November morning in 1876, on the Peninsular and Oriental steamship Khedive, Bound for Port Said, Suez, and India, we sailed for the Suez Canal, that eighth wonder of the world, with a view of examining it and the young cities which have sprung up, like Jonah's gourd, upon its banks within the last 10 years. Our steamer was one of the largest of those which passed through the canal, a magnificent specimen of naval construction in all respects, combining power, speed, space, safety, and comfort in an eminent degree, and our long run was more like a pleasure trip than a sea voyage, owing to the ad, ad, admiral arrangements of the company. Even the cuisine, which is not generally the strong feature on English boats, left nothing to desire, and the bath arrangements were most ample and satisfactory. We carried 131st class passengers and could have comfortably accommodated a score or two more. We chose the long route to Alexandria for the We chose the long route to Egypt for the benefit of the sea voyage of 14 days' duration, in preference to the faster lines via Brindisi or Marseille, by which Egypt may be reached in half the time. Last year I dined one Thursday evening at London and lunched at Alexandria on the ensuing Thursday, taking the P&O Brindisi steamer. The route via Marseille and Naples in the French Messageries steamers takes about 2 days more from London, and you are 6 days at sea instead of three. The fare by all these lines is very nearly the same. The cheapest route is by Liverpool screw steamers to Alexandria, and the Cunard, Moss, and Leyland lines from the former place are said to be well appointed and comfortable, making the run in from 12 to 14 days at little more than half the price of the other lines already mentioned. We parted with the ship and passengers after our 2 weeks' experience of both, with reluctance, for it has seldom been my lot, in the course of wanderings more varied and wide, though not so much confined to one sea as those of much bedevilled Ulysses, to have passed on board ship a more agreeable fortnight. But as we were not bound to China or India, and the captain declined the responsibility of dumping us down at his Mela as his boat passed by, we saw no use in going through to Suez. So we gathered our luggage together, descended the ship's side, and embarked ourselves, and what the Romans properly termed impedimenta, on the small boat which was to take us to the shore, where an expectant crowd in baggy breeches and no clothing worth mentioning, with very brown and exceedingly dirty faces and persons, seemed waiting to welcome and, alas, to plunder us. But a half score of years ago, when the Suez Canal was as yet an uncertainty, and posse not an essay, where now stands a thriving and growing town, were but a few scattered buildings for the use of the workmen and machinery of the canal company. But 5 years earlier, the site now occupied by piles of public and private buildings, surrounded by blooming gardens, filled, even at this wintry season of the year, with green trees and tropical flowers in full bloom, was but a barren sandy waste, whose rugged coast afforded no available harbor. Now I am going to the next question, or next theme that I organized this by, which answers such things that modern travelers still wonder and want to find out about, like what should you wear there in terms of clothes? What should you bring? Where are you going to stay? Where are you going to shop? Where are you going to eat? Those types of things. So I started with that a voyage into the Levant text from the 1600s from Meretseger books that we encountered before. I, not so impatient of the climate, nor loving company of Christians in Turkey, and but reasonably affected to reliquaries, left them, i.e., the other members of his party that he was initially traveling with, and presumed to receive a longer entertainment, whereto I found an invital freely noble of itself, and with much regard to an honourable recommendation of me sent by his excellence the Lord Ambassador of Holland at Constantinople, Sir Cornelius Haga, who, having known my kinsman Sir James Blount and some others of our name, was pleased in me to honor their memory. Here my abode in a family which had there been resident 25 years informed me of many things which with much certainty. And now we're skipping ahead to the very beginning of the 18th century with another account that we've encountered before from 1701, also from Meretseger books. From Alexandria, we set out in company of diverse travelers and merchants for Grand Cairo, and entering the deserts of Thebadia, which was at this time the basic term for what's currently modern day Luxor, and what was ancient Thebes. We took up our lodgings that night about 2 leagues beyond Dea. The ground was our bed, and the heavens our coverture. For the weather being warm and clear, we thought it not worth our while to pitch our tents. He that travels through the desert must expect no better lodgings, and unless he carries his provisions with him, may be forced to fast, unless he can digest stand, or feed on air like a chameleon. Every now and then we saw companies of Arabs crossing our way, armed with bows and arrows, and some with lances, who, though they lived by plunder and robbery, durst not attack us, by reason of our number and firearms, which they dread above all things. They were all well mounted, but so strangely clad, and of so frightful a countenance, that they looked more like devils incarnate than men who bear the image of Almighty God. Some of them came to us, offering to conduct us through the deserts, but we thanked them for their civility, choosing rather to run the risk of going out of our way than to employ such dangerous guides as might have led us amongst their own barbarous and inhuman associates, as they have served diverse strangers that traveled this way. And now we're jumping ahead to the 19th century with another text that was in the previous section. So this is that text that is prior to 1820, and it's by that woman or Baroness von Minutoli. So her husband was one of these early Egyptologists that was on one of these scholarly early expeditions, and she came with him and she wrote an account of their travels. So apparently, because again of the connections, they were offered housing by Charles Eddy, who was the French consul at the time. So that's what this passage is referencing. For our stay at Alexandria, he kindly offered us his opal, which we accepted with much pleasure. And then she has this footnote here that an opal is a name given to the houses of the consuls. Its etymology is derived from an Arabic word synonymous with fort or fortress. The greater part of these edifices, having been built in time of war, have but one entrance, so that they can be kept constantly closed during a plague or revolt. We landed the following day, i.e. at Alexandria. And as we with much pleasure. It would be difficult to express the sensations which I experienced when for the first time I passed through the streets of Alexandria. It would require the talents of a Hogarth to paint all the various scenes of this magic lantern. What bustle, what confusion is in these narrow streets, continually blocked up by an innumerable multitude of camels, mules, and asses, the cries of their drivers incessantly calling to passengers to take care of their naked feet, the vociferations and grimaces of the jugglers, the splendid costumes of the Turkish functionaries, the picturesque habit of the Bedouins, their long beards, and the grave and regular countenance of the Arabs, the nudity of some stantons, round whom the crowd throngs, the multitude of Negro slaves, the howling of the female mourners, accompanying a funeral procession, tearing their hair and beating their breasts, by the side of the noisy train of a marriage, cries of the muezzins from the tops of the minarets, summoning the people to prayers. Lastly, the afflicting picture of wretches dying with misery and want, and troops of savage dogs which pursue and harass you. All this every moment arrests the progress and attracts the attention of the astonished traveler. As for myself, stunned by this extraordinary noise, overcome with fatigue, I at length reached, though not without incredible exertions, the Ocole of France, very happy at being able to take some hours' rest. The Franks at Alexandria, as in all the other towns in the east, occupy a quarter distinct from that of the Turks. The street of the Franks, which is the finest and largest in the city, is also much less noisy than the others. The houses, though built in the fashion of the Levant, have notwithstanding a European appearance which we do not meet with anywhere else in Egypt. The other streets, as I have already observed, are very narrow and full of coffee houses and bazaars. The uncultivated ground in the environs of Alexandria being nearly sterile, it is necessary to fetch everything from a distance. The islands of the archipelago Rosetta and the fertile country of the Delta supply the city with the necessaries of life, and the continual intercourse with Europe furnishes articles of luxury. The workmen in this country are extremely indolent, so that almost all kinds of household furniture must be had from Marseille and Leghorn. This next account is from the 1830s. It is from one of these early Egyptologists, John Gardner Wilkinson, and the first part of its title is Topographies of Thebes. So that this is something that he wrote partly as an account of his travels in Thebes, but also as a guidebook to those who wanted to visit the Theban area in particular at this time. And I got it from the University of Heidelberg's online digitized collection. In making preparations for a journey to Egypt, it will be necessary that the traveler, if unacquainted with Arabic, should either provide himself with a servant at Malta who understands the language, or afterwards look out for one at Qarawara on his arrival in the Frank quarter, where several of the natives may be found who are in the habit of accompanying European travelers, and speak Italian and sometimes French. Egyptian servants, it is true, make but poor interpreters before Azamales. And I'm just going to see if I can increase the size of the screen here to make these words a little bit larger. So I tried to zoom out, but I was not able to. So it's just going to have to stay this size. I apologize. Not because the Turkish language is required, but from the contempt in which they are held by their rulers, and the consequent want of confidence they feel, added to their naturally uncouth manners. But as a traveler has little occasion to visit them, this is not a very material point. Dragomon are seldom to be met with who can either be trusted or who are at all useful. And if his object is to see the country without being desirous of paying visits of ceremony to Turkish commandants, which are as unprofitable as disagreeable, he will have every reason to be satisfied with his European and Egyptian domestics. I do not pretend to give an exact list of all the requisites for this journey, as many must depend entirely upon himself. I shall merely point out the most necessary, and then he has a little footnote down here that apparently tent, ladder, carpet, cushions, table, and the like may be purchased or ordered in Qarawara, which is a place in Thebes, and I apologize for my pronunciation of that, and for some of these other Arabic words that I know I'm not getting quite right. As a camp bedstead, bedding, and mosquito curtain, a camp stool and drawing table, umbrella, double or lined, drawing paper, pencils, and Indian rubber. And if he intends to follow European customs, a plentiful supply of tea, wine, cognac, aromatic and distilled vinegar, and as many luxuries as he may think proper. For observations, a sextant and artificial horizon, or rather Captain Keeter's repeating circle, chronometer, large and small telescope, siphon barometer, thermometers, and etc., with a good measuring tape. Every every instrument should be, when it is possible, of the same materials throughout. Wood and metal ill according with the heat of an Egyptian climate, and in their cases nails answer better than glue. In his medicine chest, the most necessary things are a lancet, diaclon, and blistering plaster, salts, rhubarb, cream of tartar, ipecacuanha, sulfate of bark, James powders, chamomile, laudanum, sugar of lead, or sulfite of zinc, niter, oil of peppermint, and other common medicines. The choice of his library will depend, of course, on his occupations or taste. I shall therefore only recommend Larcher's Herodotus, M. Champlion's Phonetic System of Hieroglyphics, Pocock den Jan Hamilton's Egypt, Kea, Modern Traveler, and Colonel Leeks or my own map of Egypt, with that of Mr. Park and Mr. Scholes of Nubia, to which may be added Brown, Bellinzoni, Burckhardt, Ptolemy, Strabo, and Pliny. But of these three last, as well as of Diodorus, extracts will suffice if he considers them to voluminous. In crossing the sea, he will find greater comforts and less civility on board an English than a foreign vessel, and should leave it to the captain to provide the table. On arriving at Alexandria, he may either put up at or with one of the inns in the Frank quarter, or remain on board the vessel. Though the accommodation in the former is far from being good, it is more convenient than to be obliged continually to look out for a boat on his return from visiting the few objects worthy of notice in the town. And in addition to this, the gates are closed at night. In visiting the catacombs, the excursion by water is preferable, from the convenience of carrying provisions and other requisites, among which he must not omit wax candles or torches, a rope, if he intends to take measurements of the architectural details, a short ladder. He will save time by going to them before he leaves the ship. In taking a boat for Quara, he had better hire a larger sort of ganga, because again, that's one of those Arabic words for a boat that I know I'm not getting the pronunciation quite right, called a diaba, the price of which will depend on the number of men and the time of year, for which they are engaged in bringing corn from Upper Egypt. The price is increased in proportion as the number of unemployed boats is diminished. For the journey he had better be provided with some biscuit, as good bread is not always to be obtained, nor is it convenient to stop to purchase it when the wind is fair. On arriving at Bu Alak, the port of Quara, so Quara is one of the ports in or closer to the Cairo area, because Bu Lak is one of the older parts of Cairo. He may send to the consulate to request a Kwawas or Yasagi, gen, gen, generally but erroneously called janissary, to pass his baggage at the customs house, who also procure camels, and unless he is acquainted with the consul, he must be contented with an inn in the Frank quarter. But if he intends making a stay there, he had better procure a house in some street in the vicinity, the price of which will vary from 50 to 100 piastres a month, while those within the Frank quarter would exceed double that sum. In his visit to the bazaar, he must not forget to purchase a carpet or two and a few mats, by which his room becomes comfortable, with furniture that equally suits a boat on going up the Nile. Should he inquire if the Turkish dress is necessary, I answer, for a voyage in Upper Egypt it is by no means so. For Quirwa it is convenient from not attracting notice, and for a journey in the desert as to the Oasis or Berenice, it is indispensably necessary, but not so on the Suez and Qusair roads. One remark, however, I must be allowed to make on dress in that country, that a person is never respected who is badly dressed, of whatever kind the costume may be, and nowhere does exterior appearance go so far as in Egypt. In going to the pyramids of Giza, he may take a bed or a mat and carpet, with a small stock of provisions, and if he makes any stay there, he may procure bread from Giza or Carta Sea, a lantern, candles, a small broom, in order to have one of the grottos swept, which makes a tolerable abode, and above all a mosquito net and an umbrella are requisite. On quitting Quarawa for Upper Egypt, he had better engage a diaba, or if he is not pressed for time, and prefers a spacious and comfortable boat, a ma'ash. But on returning, a kanga is preferable, the ma'ash being too heavy for oars and moving little quicker than the rate of the stream, nor can it pass the cataract. To remedy this inconvenience, he may take a kanga also, and on arriving at Iusu'un pay off the large boat, and pass the cataract to Nubia in the light one, which for returning has a great advantage. Or if he remains long at Thebes, he may dismiss his ma'ash and send to Quora for a kanga. The price of the former is from 600 to 800 piastres a month, the kanga and diaba from 250 to 600. A written agreement must be made with the rais or captain of the boat, in which it will be as well to stipulate that he shall not take passengers or merchandise of any kind, and that the whole boat shall be at the traveler's disposal. To start or halt at his command, that two of the sailors shall keep watch at night, and that no one shall quit the boat on the pretext of visiting relations or with similar pleas without previously asking permission. The hire of the first month may be paid in advance, and when in Upper Egypt, half of each successive month, or the wages of the boatmen only, which are 25 piastres a month each. By all means, the rais and boatmen must be made obedient to orders. He will otherwise find them insufferably unruly and continually troublesome, kind words being always considered by them the result of fear or inexperience. Nor, unless he maintains strict discipline, can he venture to give them a sheep at the large towns. But before his departure, his European servant must see that all the oars are on board and the sails in good condition. A good supply of biscuits is very necessary, as bread is not always to be met with at the small villages in Egypt, and much less in Nubia. You also require a kafas or coop for fowls, with a movable drawer at the bottom, as in bird cages. 10 or 12 quawl or bar or bardaks, a zaire or water jar, and some almond paste for purifying the water, a zimi or water bottle of Russian leather for excursion to the ruins, and if he has a large boat, a donkey, but at all events a saddle, both of which may be bought at Quora. He should provide candles, coffee, sugar, flour, rice, tobacco, mash, and plum, erdine, dried apricots, and whatever necessaries or luxuries he may want before he leaves Bulak, as few are to be obtained in Upper Egypt. Previous to putting his things on board, the rais must make an awning of mats or sailcloth before the cabin, supported by framework. And if the boat is old or wants painting, the sailors must wash the cabin, under the inspection of a servant, and paint both the roofs, all the crevices having been previously stopped with putty. This precaution is necessary if he wishes to pass comfortable nights. An iron rat trap, which he must bring from Europe, will also be of service. With regard to presents in Upper Egypt, it may be laid down as a general rule that they are quite unnecessary. It will, however, sometimes happen that the civilities of a Sheikh Balid or even a Turkish governor require some return, in which case some English gunpowder, or a watch or telescope for the latter, and a white shawl and tarbouche, or a small amber mouthpiece for the former, are more than they have any reason to expect. And although, on those occasions when their politeness arises from the hope of reward, they may be disappointed in their expectations, yet they would only consider greater presents proof of greater ignorance in the person who made them. After he has, by means of the coas of the consulate, passed his baggage at the customs house and hoisted the English flag, he must look again that the number of oars is equal to that of the crew, and give orders to the race to never to allow the boatmen to tie the sail. For to this almost all the accidents that happen on the Nile are to be attributed. If he leaves Quara in winter and dreads the hot weather, he should go direct up the Nile without stopping, and visit the ruins on his return. But if he is not going to Syria and is likely to come down during the inundation, he may visit them on his way up. The traveler coming from India and by the desert from Kosar to Kenna, who cannot forego comfort, must be provided with single pole tents for himself and servants, with a lining of a dark color and spare ropes and pegs, a sufficient supply of charcoal, as fuel is not met with on the road, a camp box with curtains, mosquito net, and blankets, wax candles and lanterns, a few carpenter's tools, pack, thread, and needles, lined or double umbrellas, a small carpet, mats, or canvas, water skins, and a supply of bottled water for his own use, well sealed and packed in strong cases. For the water of the desert, though very passable for persons accustomed to it, may not suit the taste or expectations of every one. For ladies, it will be as well to take asses, as they are a relief to the tedious motion of a camel, or of the takor or een. A person accustomed to riding will find the dromedary preferable, as it will perform the journey with greater expedition and with more comfort to the rider than the tiresome and slow-paced camel. And if he is going from Egypt to India, he should procure a leather water bottle, zamzimi, which is to be slung on the saddle. Mosquito net and curtains may be added at one end. Arabic must be spoken by some of the servants. For ladies, side saddles are requisite. Tents may be purchased at Quara, the best round, single-poled green tents for about $20 or $25, which for high winds are preferable to those with two poles. Nets made of the date rope for the heavy baggage should also be bought there, one pair to each camel load, which the Arabs calculate at about 3 quantar or 100 weight. The dromedary and camel saddles are provided by the Arabs. As few chairs and tables should be carried as possible. Those on the principle of camp stools are the most convenient. At Karnak, the traveler may take up his abode in the northwest tower of the great temple. For further information on this subject, I refer the traveler who visits the capital of Egypt to Osman Afandi, dragoman of the consulate, who combines with the greatest readiness to assist his compatriots, perfect acquaintance with the customs of the country in which he has lived so long, and to judge from my own opinion as well as that of other travelers, I feel persuaded he will have reason to acknowledge the value of his services in the British consulate. The use of steamboats effectively obviates the necessity of adopting the precautions resorted to by the ancients or by the Arab mariners, and nothing more is required to ensure safety than the possession of an accurate survey of the Red Sea, and consequently the means of avoiding its reefs and shoals. The next account comes, or is the first part of it is titled An American in Egypt, from the 1840s, gotten from the Library of Congress, and I think that is the account that I'm going to end this part 3 video on as well. The principal hotel of Alexandria, kept by a Frank and quite in the European style, we found very comfortable, and the charges not more than about twice as extravagant as those in most towns on the continent of Europe, notwithstanding bread, meat, and other articles of food are 200 or 300% cheaper in Egypt than in any other part of the world that I have visited. However cheap, dear, comfortable, or uncomfortable it might have appeared to others, we were glad enough to escape the dismissal scenes that we had just encountered on our way from the shore, and take up our quarters in it for the time being. So I'm going to end this part 3 video there for the part 4 video, we are going to start with a another account by Wilkinson that I got from the Internet Archive from 1843. See you next time. Bye.